Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley. As always, I am your host, Carrie, along with my co-host, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. Our Canal Days series delves into the vast array of historic sites throughout Massachusetts with Robert's expertise of the state's history as our personal guide. Each episode, we uncover pivotal historic locations and landmarks, delving into the seminal and monumental significance they hold within. Today's episode of Canal Days will be perusing the Catholic Cemeteries of Springfield, Massachusetts. So, can you recall the early Catholic cemeteries within Springfield?
Well, there's one now outside the border of, on the border of Springfield and Chicopee, still in Springfield though. And it's called the St. Matthew's Cemetery. That was the first cemetery ever in western Massachusetts. It's from about 1845 or so, maybe even a little earlier, 1842. It's not actually buried in, I don't think anyone's been buried in there 100 years. But it was quite active in the beginning because it was the only one. And then when the second one came around, maybe 10 years later, it was still active because it became a diocesan cemetery. That means that all institutions that were Catholic were buried into there. And so thus, it was quite heavily used. Now, if you go there and you can't enter the gates because they're always locked, but you'll look at it and you'll say, wow, this is a big cemetery. How come there's so few gravestones? About 8,000 people are buried there. Only 400 names are inscribed in the stones there. That's 5%. Most cemeteries are 50% correspondence between inscribed names and burials. Why so few? Because the Catholics were so poor in the beginning, and so many of them were dying young. And thus, this cemetery has so few stones around. Then came around the St. Benedict Cemetery, started in Springfield for use by a church with the same name. The predecessor of St. Michael's church was St. Benedict's Church, and they started their own cemetery on Liberty Street at the corner of Armory Street, found in 1848, so thus right before the St. Matthew's Cemetery was found. And these two old cemeteries have, of course, very, very old gravestones in them, some even in the brownstone era, and so they're quite old.
And can you explain about the churchyards and crypt burials throughout the Catholic churches?
Okay, in Springfield, you have a couple of churchyards and one crypt burial, and so I'll tell you about those. These are quite wonderful. And what I mean by that is that the Cathedral of St. Michael the Archangel has two pastures buried within it. Remember that it was a church before it became a cathedral. It became a church about 1856, and it became a cathedral in 1870. And so the first two pastures that are here are pastors of the church without being bishops themselves. And Michael Gallagher was the pastor 1856 to 1869, and he's buried right on the front steps of the cathedral. And Thomas O'Sullivan came next, 1869 to 1870, and he's buried also on the front steps on the other door. And so two burials right at the edge of the beginning of the church. Inside the church itself, in the basement or below the altar area, are the first three bishops of the Springfield Catholic Diocese. So from 1870 onwards, Springfield had its own Catholic diocese, and the first three bishops ever for this cathedral are buried in what's called the St. Augustine Mortuary Chapel. And inside of there are buried Patrick O'Reilly, the first bishop from 1870 to 1892. Then Thomas Bevan, bishop from 1892 to 1920 will be the second burial that took place in the St. Augustine Chapel. And then Thomas O'Leary, 1920 to 1949. He would be the third and the last burial of anyone in the St. Augustine crypt. And all the bishops after that would be buried in other locations, most especially in St. Michael's Cemetery itself. Now, lastly, the Sacred Heart Churchyard has a burial location for its founder and his first pastor, and he's buried to the left side of the church. And he has quite a nice gravestone for himself. That's James McDermott. When he died in Paris, France, and his body was brought back to Springfield, and he's buried alongside his church in the churchyard.
And stick around because we'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. Are you fascinated by local history and eager to investigate the obscure treasures off the beaten path around Massachusetts? Or maybe just seeking an unforgettable cultural activity for family and friends to enjoy? Look no further than Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, founded by Robert Camus. With over a decade of experience, Robert offers captivating tours and presentations of historic sites and landmarks throughout the state. Whether you're interested in canals, cemeteries, charming churches, or more, Robert's tours provide a unique and enriching experience for all. And that's not it. You can also schedule private tours tailored to your interests, ensuring a personalized adventure and unforgettable memories. Perfect for families or groups of all sizes, making for an exciting hands-on learning experience that brings history to life. Simply visit theholyokecanaltour.org or email bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com to book your private tour today. But wait, there's more. Don't miss out on Robert's podcast and video series, Canal Days, where you can dive even deeper into the vital history of the Connecticut River Valley. Plus, for those who may not be local or would rather enjoy on the go or from the comfort of their home, Canal Days brings the adventure right to your screen. So don't miss out. Uncover the pivotal past with historical tours of Greater Holyoke to make memories that will last a lifetime. Remember to log on to holyokecanaltour.org for more information and secure your personalized experience today. Welcome back to our Canal Days episode of the Catholic Cemeteries in Springfield. And can you describe the large modern Catholic cemeteries in the city of Springfield today?
Yes, there's the St. Michael's Cemetery, made a year after the diocese became on its own, the Springfield Catholic Diocese, 1870. Cemetery came in 1871. And it's an enormous cemetery with many wonderful features. There's a columbarium, a lot of priests and nuns are buried there, and a lot of parishioners from the Springfield area are buried here. There's an enormous baby section. And the St. Aloysius Cemetery came in 1876, and that serves the Catholics of the Indian Orchard Village, which is in Springfield, also a very large place, and has, of course, some special areas, not as many as St. Michael's, of course. Now, on the 100th anniversary of the St. Michael's Cemetery, that is in 1971, the Springfield Catholic Diocese decided that they needed a large, modern, and beautiful cemetery added to the numbers that they had already, and that was the Gate of Heaven Cemetery in the far southeastern section of Springfield. And that Gate of Heaven Cemetery was made in the garden style, and of course, curved paths, lots of nice trees and bushes, and a very large columbarium.
And can you give us a comparison of the Catholic and Protestant churches in Springfield and how they differ?
The churches didn't have their own cemeteries with the Protestants. They typically have or share between the Protestants. And I'll tell you about some other differences in their cemeteries. And the first one is now gone, so we don't have to talk much about it. But the second one, so now the oldest, is Cherry Lane Cemetery. And that's from, it's on Cherry Lane, of course. It's from 1826. All right, so it's not much older than the Catholic cemeteries. And that's a big difference from most communities around Massachusetts. Usually the Protestant cemeteries are very old, and the Catholic cemeteries are quite modern, like 1870s or so. and there'd be 200-year difference or 150-year difference between the two. But in Springfield, there's only like a 15-year difference between the Catholic and the Protestant cemeteries. So they have a very similar look to it. You don't have too many of the ancient Protestant graveyards around. The old Springfield Cemetery was moved into the modern Springfield Cemetery in the very back, and that's the only place you'll find very old stones. But on the other hand, there are some garden-style cemeteries in Springfield for the Protestants, and they're all gorgeous. So, for instance, the Oak Grove Cemetery, the Springfield Cemetery, and the Hillcrest Park Cemetery are all in the garden style. And then there's a few neighborhood cemeteries around the area. But this is a very rare thing. Thus, there's not much difference in the look because the age of them is not drastically different. And that's not true of many communities at all.
And thanks for listening to Canal Days in our episode on the Catholic Cemeteries of Springfield, Massachusetts, and joining us on our journey through the rich history of the Connecticut River Valley. We hope you enjoyed uncovering some of the hidden and overlooked marvels and their fascinating stories that shaped our past and the state of Massachusetts. A special thanks to Robert Comoon, founder of the Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, for sharing his passion and expertise with us. Remember, you can find more information about Robert's tours, book private tours, and explore the Canal Days video and podcast series at holyokecanaltour.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and share. We'd like to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, keep exploring and discovering the history that surrounds us. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune into our next episode of Canal Days at holyokecanaltour.org. Until next time.